gentlemen, the time has come for me to tell you something important. You see, Eric Metaxas was born with a weak chin. In fact, it was so weak that doctors didn't think it would survive past childhood. But thanks to the magic of prosthetics, Eric had a state-of-the-art chin implant installed, and now he's right as rain. Here he is, the Jay Leno of radio, Eric Metaxas.
Oh, hello. I didn't see you come in. Folks, before I tell you about my exciting guest for the hour, I just have to tell you two quick things. First of all, last night, I was on Tucker Carlson. The segment was about 6 minutes long in which I was able to speak, which is an eternity. It's unbelievable. My genius was undiluted by any other panelists or anything like that. And so if you haven't seen it, it was actually, in all seriousness, a very serious subject. But that was last night on Tucker Carlson. You can look it up, or it's on Twitter or on my Facebook page. Tonight, Fox Nation, I think it's at 6 p.m. Eastern or 7, will air my appearance with Tom Shalhoub. It's a quiz show, one of the most fun things I've ever done. That's on Fox Nation tonight with Tom Shalhoub. As you know, it's Milo Yiannopoulos week on the Eric Metaxas Show. In Hour 2, I'll be speaking with Milo Yiannopoulos. In Hour 1, I'm speaking with another friend, a very dear friend, someone I can hardly believe is in the studio with me right now. Look, he's right here. Michael Youssef, welcome to the program.
Wonderful.
Michael, I sort of can't believe you're here. Usually when I see you, I'm in Atlanta.
That's right.
Thank you for coming to our city.
Thank you.
We have a lot of important things to talk about.
Yes, sir.
Okay, first of all, you have a new book out called The Third Jihad.
Right.
Overcoming Radical Islam's Plan for the West.
Yeah.
I've read the book. I know the book. I've even interviewed you on the book on a separate program.
Right.
But what I want to talk to you about, first of all, is the subject of the book, The Third Jihad. I hope people will get a copy of the book.
Yes.
But also I want to talk to you about what has happened since I interviewed you on your show
Right.
about this book, because this is something, when you send me the emails,
Right.
I almost couldn't believe it. I read this about other people.
Yeah.
My name has never been included. And the names of friends of mine, like your name,
Yeah.
it's never come this close to home.
Exactly.
Very chilling
Yeah.
stuff. So please tell my audience what I'm referring to.
The television program that we syndicate all over the world, first of all, 2 Australian channels, secular channels, refused to air it. The program with you and I.
You mean normally they carry your program?
Oh, yeah, the CAT program, we paid for it, and they said, please give us one of the old sermons because we're not going to air this one. We don't want to talk about militant Islam. Then TBN UK aired it, and ever since, the British government went back with a fine-tooth comb trying to find something that we said that they disagree with.
That you or I said, because
Exactly.
it was our conversation. Okay.
Exactly.
First of all, let me say kudos to TBN UK
Absolutely.
for having the courage.
Yes.
Although I'm not surprised, I expect it of TBN.
Yes.
But they aired our conversation. Now, because I was part of the conversation, I remember the conversation, and
Yep.
I remember that there wasn't anything that we said
Right.
that was wrong.
No.
That was hateful. I mean, I know that. I would remember if I dared to
Sure.
say something like that, and I certainly would remember if you had said it since
Yeah.
I was interviewing you. But you're telling me now, who in the British government did this?
It's the Government Office of Communication that they watchdog over anything that's broadcast. And they're watching Christian programmings. They don't watch Islamic programmings or try to stop those. And they have radio stations totally owned by Muslims and Islamists that they never do anything because they're fearful. But they pick on Christians. So, for example, we said some things on the program about indicated somebody said or somebody did or this is a. They said, give us evidence. So what we did, we compiled evidence. For example, we said that the Labour Party is being infiltrated by Islamists. And they said, what evidence do you have for that? So what we did, we sent them articles where members of the British Labour Party saying, my party is being invaded by Islamists. I mean, we gave them all the evidence, said, okay. We went back and looked at the interview and watched again, and you and Mr. Metaxas talked about the European Human Rights Court that outlawed any blasphemy against the Prophet of Islam. And so we got all the research and we showed them the report, when the decision was handed down and who was involved, and we just gave all the details. They're trying to nitpick at something that is strictly Christian. And we said in the program, you remember how many times we said we love the Muslim people. I have friends who are dear Muslims, heads of states, cabinet ministers in the Arab world. They're all my friends. I go and visit them all the time. But that kind of, yeah, we saw that, but it's really very...
So this is, let's say it, this is chilling.
Absolutely.
And the reason, and I have to say, because I've never been the subject of anything like this, it was the first time I was able to experience it firsthand, and it was, in fact, chilling. To read my name in an official capacity and to read official documents from the British government that were intended to intimidate and to threaten. And when I read my name, part of me was frightened and part of me laughed. And I thought, this is hilarious, because I had a wonderful conversation with you. I have Muslim friends, you have Muslim friends, and we're having a conversation. But the British government is so in bed with what I would call radical Islam that they are watchdogs for radical Islam and against anything that would stand against that. And of course, a robust Christianity must stand against that.
Absolutely. I'm sorry to get you into trouble. That's the problem. Anybody gets associated with me gets into trouble.
I'm honored. And actually, Michael, it's why I wanted to have you back on the show. I said, when you sent me these documents, you know, my eyes popped out and I said, we need to talk about this on my program.
Absolutely.
Because this is just crazy. In other words, it's one thing when it happens to someone else, but when it happens to me, I have a perspective on it that obviously I've never had before. I remember our conversation. People can watch the conversation.
Exactly.
Now, how can they watch the conversation? Where can they go? Is it on your...
LTW.org.
LTW, Leading the Way Ministries.
Leading the Way.
LTW.org. If anybody wants to watch the conversation that I had with this hateful man, and I was also very hateful, and I'm glad that we have oversight in England because they need to prevent this kind of hateful speech. So people can watch it. But I remember the conversation with you, and I remember thinking, this is one of the most important conversations I've ever had.
Sure.
Because I know that you have the credentials. I don't. You have the credentials to understand this from the inside out.
Right.
I want to talk about that a little bit, Michael, because there are many people listening to this or watching this who maybe don't know you. So let's give a little bit of your background. You were born where?
I was born in Egypt in a Christian community. That goes back to first century.
All right. So you are a lifelong Egyptian and a lifelong Christian.
Right.
You've spent part of your life in Australia.
Right, in the 70s. And
you picked up a wife in Australia, and you brought her home, I suppose, to... Where did you first live?
We lived in California for a couple of years, then we've been in Atlanta for over 40 years.
No. No.
Yes.
40.
Yes. I mean, the church I founded with 28 people is now 32 years old.
Actually, that's hard for me to believe. And by the way, that's one of the most beautiful churches I have ever seen. Church of the Apostles in Atlanta. If you're looking for a place to go, I've had the honor of being in that pulpit a few times. And that's where you said to me, would you like a Red Bull? I'll never forget it. I said, this is a full-service church. When I'm preparing for my sermon, and you come and you say, would you like a Red Bull? So you've been in Atlanta, you preach, but you have a huge ministry around the world on TV and radio. We don't have time to get into that right now, but I want people to know that if they want to find out more about you, they can go to Leading the Way, LTW.org, LTW.org. What day is today?
4th.
Wednesday? Is today Wednesday? This always happens to me. Today is Wednesday, the 24th of April. In hour 2 today, I'll be speaking with Milo Yiannopoulos, if you can believe it, folks. Stick around. It's the Eric Metaxas Show. We'll be right back with Michael Youssef. Hey there, folks. It's the Eric Metaxas Show. You can tell by the Elton John music, probably. I'm talking to my friend Michael Youssef about his new book, The Third Jihad. I want to tell you, remind you that tonight I'm going to be on Fox Nation. I don't know if it's 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. with Tom Shalhoub. It's a quiz show. Some of the most fun I have ever had. Last night I was on Tucker Carlson. If you haven't seen the clip, please check it out. In an hour or two today, we have Milo Yiannopoulos. But getting back to my friend Michael Youssef. Michael, this book is a provocative book, and that's why we got in trouble with the British government.
That's right.
Where does that stand right now? Because, again, the documents, when I read my name in these transcripts, I thought I'm living in Nazi Germany. It was very frightening.
It is. The lawyers have responded with details. First of all, that particular code of communication in their government code doesn't apply to us at all. It only applies to the news services if you give misleading news.
Okay, so what you're telling me, though, is that they're intimidating you deliberately.
Absolutely.
And what I find really interesting is that if you were not the head of a huge organization with money and lawyers, I mean, the idea that you're having to pay lawyers to find the documents, and even though you're totally innocent and you know this, you're having to do this. And this is one of the ways that obviously, whether it's a police state or any kind of totalitarian state, they begin to bully people because they know you have no recourse. In other words, you're going to spend some money. We're going to push you around, and they have the power of the state to do that. But I wanted to have you on so that people understand this is happening now. It happened to you. It's happening to me because I interviewed you, and it's about this book. And so this book is so important. This is the Third Jihad. That's why I want to talk to you about this book. I hope people will buy the book and read the book. So for those who are just tuning in or who are unfamiliar with your thesis, tell us about the Third Jihad.
Everything, including the title of the book, is taken from their writings, the writings of Islamists. Again, I keep making the distinction. Every media program I've been on hundreds, I make a distinction between Islamists and Muslims. I have many Muslim friends. They are actually more against the militant Muslims than I am. And I can tell you some more about this later, about President Sisi, for example, and the stand that he took against militant Islam.
So Sisi in Egypt is basically a good guy.
Oh, he's a great guy. Yes, absolutely.
And our relations with him, the Trump administration's relations with him are positive.
Absolutely. He was never invited, not once, during the Obama administration. He was treated like a guy who conducted a coup when he had nothing to do with the 30 million people who went to the streets and demanded the removal of the Muslim Brotherhood. So the Muslim Brotherhood goes out, and they come to America, and they go to England, and they're stirring up trouble in these two countries. And they're training and recruiting people to run for political office. This is part of the jihad, you see. It's not just terrorism. In fact, some of the intellectual jihadis don't really like terrorism. They want to infiltrate and take the system from the inside.
Okay, they've done this in England.
They've done it in England.
There's no question.
And look at the speech that Congressman Omar gave to CARE. CARE is basically a front for the Muslim Brotherhood in America.
Congresswoman Omar, I have to say, when she first came in, some people asked the question. I was talking, I think it was on my radio program. It must have been in last November, and we did a call-in show. Right. And somebody called in and said, how is it possible to have a Muslim run for Congress? She's wearing a hijab. She took the oath. And I said, just as I know you would say, no one in America can have a problem with a Muslim running for office. There's nothing wrong with that. That's absurd. Atheists can run for office. Any kind of Christian, anyone can run for office. The question is, do they have fidelity to the U.S. Constitution? That's the question. And so I defended Omar. But in the months since, it has become clear to me that, in fact, she is a Trojan horse. She has been sent here by the enemies of American self-government, that the more she says, the more I'm convinced that she is the enemy of America as we have known it, and she's going to use her power and her bully pulpit and the naivete of the left
and
push
of course her protection as a congresswoman. But look what she said. in a speech to CARE. CARE is the Islamic organization in America, which is a front of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah.
She gave a speech in Beverly Hills.
I'm sorry, it's spelled CAIR, CARE.
Right.
And yes, they are bad guys.
Well, they are militant, and they are pro-Sharia. And she gave the main speech, the annual speech, not long ago, a few weeks ago. And she called upon Muslims to raise hell in America. Secondly, and I'm quoting, this is word for word, nobody can deny that because somebody did something on September 11, it doesn't mean that we need to be intimidated. Somebody did something on September 11.
Yeah.
There were not Islamist militants who did this. And that in itself, it just smacks at sensitivity to even the American life.
Well, I think the issue where it gets complicated is, in some ways, there's truth to that, right? She says, listen, some of these maniacs did this thing, so that has nothing to do with your average Muslim. That's correct. But the problem is, she is not an America-loving, freedom-loving average American, and neither are the representatives of CARE. And so in a creepy way, because every lie has some truth in it.
Right.
And so what the Muslims who are doing what you're talking about, what they do is they use the freedoms of the West
Right.
to work against the West.
Exactly. And she said, I love freedom and why I came to America. But look, in this book, The Third Jihad, I have a big section on the Somalis in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the operation they're running between here and Mogadishu, Somalia. And it will make people literally sit up and take notes.
Okay. Omar was elected to Congress by those Somalis.
Exactly.
Okay, number one.
Yes.
Number two, how is it that there are Somali Muslims in Minnesota?
There is a large number because they work in abattoirs and in the meat packing plants.
But how did they get there? It's just such a strange thing. Minnesota, Somalia. What happened?
Well, they came because they are experts on meat packing, just like the Yemenis many, many years ago came to Michigan for the car plants. But these people were coming as refugees. They just want to be Americans. The Somalis are here on a mission. And I'm not saying all of them, nobody can ever make that statement. But so many of them are still connected with Al-Shabaab, which is this is the arm of the ISIS. ISIS has many, many children all over the world, in Indonesia, in India, as we've seen in Sri Lanka, and elsewhere around the world. And in the end, somebody said that's a womb that's producing all these people. But actually, to me, terrorism, horrible as it is, I literally wept when I saw those babies being blown up in Sri Lanka not long ago on Easter Sunday. But
a few days ago.
Yeah.
This is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Christians being murdered. And of course, the news media is uncomfortable because it doesn't fit their narrative. In their narrative, Christians are wicked.
Yeah.
Christians are the troublemakers. And of course, they call them Easter worshipers.
Easter worshipers. Never Obama nor Hillary Clinton called them Christians worshiping on Easter Sunday. Said Easter worshipers. Were they worshiping the bunny, or worshiping the Easter egg, or what's the Easter worshiper? It doesn't make sense. But you see, this whole idea, right-wing Christian, is the man who bombed the New Zealand mosque is an atheist, and he said that repeatedly on Facebook, on social media. He's an atheist. They call him right-wing Christian.
They did? See,
Absolutely.
actually, I heard that, but to hear it from you again. Well, again, we're working against a narrative. I hope people will get your book, The Third Jihad, because you explain all of this. The idea, Michael, that we have Somalis who are in Minnesota who have elected Representative Omar, who you say are in touch with Al-Shabaab, which is in touch with ISIS. This is amazing. The news does not cover what you're saying.
Well, we have another one from Michigan, Talib, who is also in connection with Hamas. She's a Palestinian, and she is a congresswoman from Michigan. And they all work in cohort with the left wing. The first time I've ever seen the left wing, I mean, really leftists marrying the left ideology to Islam was President Nasser of Egypt, where I lived in the 60s, and I saw him doing that.
Hang on one second. I want to continue this conversation. Folks, the book is The Third Jihad with Dr. Michael Youssef. We'll be right back. Folks, it's the Eric Metaxas Show. We're talking with Dr. Michael Youssef about his new book, very important book, The Third Jihad, Overcoming Radical Islam's Plan for the West. This is incendiary material. Unfortunately, it's true. Dr. Youssef, you know probably the work of Baroness Caroline Cox. She has been a voice, a heroic voice.
Met her many times, yeah. Speaking
on the same issue.
Yeah.
She's a member of the House of Lords in Parliament.
Yep.
There's almost no one but Baroness Cox speaking out. Britain seems to me on the way to being lost in this third jihad.
The 2 or 3 others are helping her. Lord Pearson is one of them, and they really are, but they're small voice, very small voice. I was in a House of Lords, was entertained by 3 senior members of the House of Lords last October. And we talked about this, and they understand the problems. In fact, some of them would kind of speak hushly because we were in a big room and a lot of people there.
I wonder if TBN UK would air this conversation on their British stations. I hope they might do that in full, because the British people need to understand, number one, you and I love Muslims. We have friends who are Muslims. So we're not talking about Islam or Muslims. We're talking about a certain brand of Muslims who want to undermine the freedoms of the West. In Europe and in the United States of America, it is happening now. We need to warn them. You have done so by writing a whole book about it called The Third Jihad.
And it comes from the writings in Arabic. You see, I read Arabic still. And I read people like Youssef Qaradawi, who, by the way, they're intellectual kind of brain trust of the Islamists, and he is no longer able to go back to his home country, Egypt. He's barred from going there, so he lives in Qatar, writing and stirring up. So I have a lot of material. In fact, all of my material is what they say. It's not what I think, or it's what some right-wing conservative thinks. It's what they write. They said, this is how our third jihad, they call it our third jihad. Our first jihad stopped in France in the midst of 600, Charles Martel. Second jihad, 1400, came to Vienna and stopped. Now this is our third jihad. And they're really saying, well, we're going to do it with intimidation, but we're going to do it with birth rate, and we're going to do it by infiltrating the political system. And it's right there from their material.
I don't think anybody's had the brazenness to say such a thing, but the only parallel I can think of when I hear the third jihad is the Third Reich. Mm-hmm. In other words, there are people willing to use the tools of democracy and the naivete of a biblically illiterate population to bring in an ideology which is the enemy of freedom, which is the enemy of everyone in Great Britain, the enemy of everyone in the West. It is happening now in America. You've bravely written this book, The Third Jihad, but we're trying to ring the bells. But the same thing happened, Michael, when Hitler was rising to power. He wrote the book called Mein Kampf, and in that book he laid out his ideology. No one paid attention. Now, it's hard to make an excuse because that's in German. It's not so difficult. People can say, well, I've never heard anything like this. You have done the research. You've read the Arabic. You have written this book based on, as you say, what they have said.
Exactly.
This is not your distortion.
No.
You're using their words. So what do they say?
Well, they say we have been, ever since the rise of Islam in the middle of 600s, we've been wanting to overtake Europe, because that's a big prize. Rome, to them, is the ultimate in their victory and in terms of proving the world that Islam is superior to Christendom.
Right.
And they've been trying to do this for a long, long time. Then they went into their own dark ages when the Ottoman Empire became the sick man of Europe. And so now, with the rise of the oil, they began to say, okay, maybe this is our chance. And I'm not saying all of the Arabs or all of the Muslims.
But can we deny that Saudi Arabia, which has been an ally of the U.S., has used its wealth to help these people about whom we're speaking?
They had in the past. Right now, Prince Salman is really genuinely trying to bring Saudi Arabia out of that domain.
Okay.
In fact, he is the nemesis. I mean, he's really against the Muslim Brotherhood.
Okay.
And that's why he united with Egypt and the Gulf states against countries like Turkey, Qatar, and Iran, who are supporting the Muslim Brotherhood and Islamization. He is trying to really change that image. But in the 70s and the 80s, they poured in hundreds of billions of dollars all over the world on madrasas and education system.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. Saudi Arabia was and played a very major role. But one has to always be truthful. I'm watching, I'm reading, I am seeing, I'm examining, and the young prince is trying to move Saudi Arabia from that orbit.
Well, that's, of course, hugely encouraging, and I'm glad to hear you say that to me. I know that he met with a number of evangelical
I was invited, but I couldn't
leaders.
go. Yeah.
I was not invited, and I could go. But seriously, it's that's encouraging. We're going to go to another break. Folks, the book is The Third Jihad, Overcoming Radical Islam's Plan for the West. The author is Dr. Michael Youssef, my guest for the hour. Stick around. Every time I hear that, take me to the pilot of your soul, I feel that means I want to take you to Jesus. Jesus is the pilot of my soul. Just in case you're scoring at home, you can write that down. I'm sitting here with my friend Michael Youssef. We're talking about his new book, The Third Jihad, Overcoming Radical Islam's Plan for the West. Michael, this is very important. I don't know how to underscore it sufficiently. We are in a battle. Most people in the West are asleep. Most people in the West don't want to think about this. Our cultural elites and our government leaders are selling us out. What can we do?
Well, I think it's about time for the people of all faith, because I know there are some Muslim people in this country who are really fighting Islamists. My friend from Arizona, his name escaped me. He has been on television day in and day out, and he's saying, "I am fighting Islamists."
In other words, there are a number of pro-American, pro-freedom Muslims who are fighting what we would call the radicalized pro-caliphate, pro-Sharia Muslims who are trying to undermine the freedoms of the West.
In fact, it's embarrassment to them. They do not want to identify with them. And they have organizations in America who are trying to fight that. But we're the Christians who have said, oh, no, we should take it on the chin, and we should not really even wake up to the fact that this could be dangerous for our children and grandchildren. And the idea that loving it doesn't mean you have to be stupid. And we love the people, and I have proven my love for the people. I'm going to be 71 this year, so I am not a young man. I've been around for a long time. I have proved my love for the Muslim people. I take the gospel to 169 million homes 24/7 on Malakot or Kingdom Sat, because I love the Muslim people. Why do I spend sleepless nights and spend millions of dollars of taking the gospel to every corner of the globe, particularly in the Arab world? It's because I love them. If I didn't care, why would I be bothered? But I love the Muslim people.
Look, we have to make this point. We made it on your show when I interviewed you, the one that got us in trouble with the Brits. The point is that Christians are commanded to love our enemies.
Yes.
That means our ideological enemies. In other words, why do I have gay friends? Why do I have friends who are politically different from me?
Yeah.
Why do I have Muslim friends? Because I'm commanded to love people, and I do love them.
Yes.
Now, the difference is their ideology. We're playing all this Elton John. I know that Elton John is one of your neighbors in Atlanta, and I know that you love him.
Absolutely.
And I know that I love him.
I pray for him.
And the point is, you can love someone and disagree with them on some issues. And so this is not an issue of of love.
Yes.
This is an issue of being practical.
Right.
And so when you make a point, in other words, when I make a point, I guess I want to make the specific point that it is when someone's ideology
Yes.
impinges upon freedom,
Right.
that's when the red flag goes up. And so when LGBTQ activists say not just I'm going to do what I'd like to do, but I'm going to force you
And your
to
children.
applaud
Yeah.
what I'm doing, I say now you're impinging upon my freedom.
Yeah.
When Muslims practice their faith, I have no problem with that. But when their Muslim ideology becomes the kind of ideology that impinges upon my freedom of religion and my other freedoms, that's when we take a stand. So we're not taking a stand against being gay or being Muslim. We may have a difference, but the point, and we do have a
Or
difference.
even being a communist. I mean, we're atheists
that's-
and agnostics. We
That's
pray
the
for
point.
them. Yeah.
And it's an important distinction. I just wanted to make it so people don't misunderstand us.
But the demagoguery that comes out it's like 30 plus years ago, I spent a little time talking to a gay lobbyist. And I said to him, I said, surely you must know that I love you as a person. He said, I know you say that, but unless you love what I do, you don't really love me.
Yeah.
And since then, of course, we had the homophobe, and of course the Islamists learned from them, so they got the Islamophobe and all this phobe. I've never been afraid of anybody. I have no phobia of any kind. I love them all. But they do not want to hear that. That's the problem. And they are the ones who have the ears of the secular media.
Right.
And the secular media broadcast that message, Christians are haters, Christians are haters. No matter how many times we say, no, we're not, we love you,
Yeah.
we prove our love for you, they're going to keep saying it.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, is that Hitler was able to do what he did with the complicity of the naive West.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
question.
And we had many people, many Christians in Germany, on liberals and conservatives, who allowed him to get away with what he did. We see the same thing now happening in America and the West, where people have a very naive view of Christianity, where they don't believe in fighting. They think fighting is unbiblical.
Yeah.
They forgot about David and Goliath. They forgot about many things that sometimes God calls us to fight, sometimes with a sword or a slingshot, sometimes with words. But there's a time to fight, and it's not unloving to fight.
No, and Jesus walks in the temple and he saw the corruption. What does he do? He turns the table upside down. I mean, they always make
Oh,
Jesus...
Jesus would never do that.
They make him
Are
look
you
like
sure?
a milquetoast, kind of a spineless Jesus. But the reality is, he was against evil. And he is against evil. And if we are going to be Christ-like, we need to speak the truth, speak it loudly, speak it in love. And we cannot allow the intimidation to get to us. That's the point of getting old. They're not going to intimidate me. I'm going to speak until the Lord takes me home.
I have to say, you have spoken bravely, and it's one of the reasons I love you so much. Even writing this book, The Third Jihad, I mean, to write a book specifically on this subject in a way that's obviously loving, it's why I wanted to have you on this program, because I said there are many Americans that don't know about this. They ought to buy the book, Overcoming Radical Islam's Plan for the West. We have to establish this is true.
Yes.
This is not something you made up.
No.
You're not a fanatic. You know this to be true.
Yeah.
And it's our obligation to tell people. If people don't listen, that's their issue. But folks, I'm telling you, I wish Tucker Carlson would have you on to talk about this. I wish that others on Fox News would understand this is the ideological battle of our day. It ties into everything else. We'll be right back with Michael Youssef. It's the Eric Metaxas Show. Folks, it's the Eric Metaxas Show. I'm talking to Michael Youssef about his brand new book, The Third Jihad, Overcoming Radical Islam's Plan for the West. I would say, Michael, that first of all, people need to know what's in this book. People need to know what is happening. People need to pray about it. People need to fight. People need to elect the right leaders.
Yeah.
But also, we need Christian revival. Christian revival in the West would change everything.
No question. But I often say, and by the way, I had the privilege of sitting at the feet of the man who is was a great authority on revival, written more books than anybody else, Dr. J. Edwin Orr, an Irishman. He was living in California when I lived in California in the 70s, and we befriended, and I learned so much from that man about revival. See, here's the problem. We are praying for a revival, But the Christians themselves, this is really the problem. God is not going to send a revival until we, the believers, stop living like those in the world.
Yes.
And try to imitate the world and do everything. I mean, there's no distinction now between Christians
Well,
and
give us some examples. What do you see?
Well, look at the most popular Christian television programs. They're all motivational, self-help. There's no repentance. Without repentance, the church can never experience revival. And repentance starts among the believers in the church. It's not just the outside.
I mean, that's a scriptural quote. That's a scriptural quote. Repentance starts in the house of God.
Absolutely. And until that happens, and we have become sensitive towards sin and repentance and guilt, instead of saying, well, you know, people have enough guilt and we don't want to make them feel any worse.
Yeah.
And so we are now easing sin, allowing sin, permitting sin, and saying, well, it doesn't really matter as long as you have positive thoughts. As long as that is the general thinking in churches across America, how can God send a revival when we're not living
positive
the
thoughts?
Sanctified life?
This is pretty bad. We need repentance. We need a sense of sin. David Wilkerson, who in many ways was a spiritual father to me, he preached this.
Yes.
We need to have a sense of God's holiness.
Absolutely.
I think when we talk about the issue of abortion, that's the biggest one, that it's a tremendous sin. And I think maybe the reason people are afraid to see the horror and evil of sin is because they're unaware of the forgiveness and love of God. In other words, you're able to repent when you know God is there willing to embrace you.
Right, but also we have pride. Pride is that we can do it ourselves. We can really save ourselves. And the reason why the crosses are being removed from the public eye is because some way, subconsciously, reminds people that they are sinners and they need the Christ of the cross to save them. And they don't want to see it in public eye. It's a simple piece of wood, the crossbar, but they don't want it in public. They're removing it. They're fighting it. That's a sin in the inside. But for us, as believers, and so many of new churches saying, well, let's not put a cross in our building because it turns them off. We don't want to turn people off.
Unbelievable.
A lot of the new churches now have no crosses.
Unbelievable. Are you listening to this? Fortunately, we're going to keep you on into hour 2, folks. In hour 2, more with Michael Youssef. And then most of the hour will be with our friend Milo Yiannopoulos. Very provocative and always very fun conversation with Milo. I want to remind you, I was on Tucker Carlson last night. Check out the video. It's on Twitter. It's on Fox News. It's on my Facebook page. And also, I'll be on with Tom Shalhoub tonight. Quiz show, foxnation.com. Check it out. Stick around. Done with hour 1. Here comes hour 2.
Children all over the world love Eric, except for one 10-year-old girl named Ramona. She can't stand Eric, and she's not afraid to say so. Yeah, okay, I admit it. I am Ramona. I hate you, Eric. I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, infinity. Oh yeah, and here you are. I mean, here he is. Eric Metaxas.
Ramona? Really, Todd? Ramona? Wow. Hey, pray for Todd, folks. It sounds serious. I'm talking in this hour, continuing the conversation with my friend Michael Youssef. We began it in hour 1. We now continue it. And after this segment, I will have the great fun to continue speaking with Milo Yiannopoulos. It's Milo Week on the Eric Metaxas Show. Buckle your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy week. Michael Youssef, welcome back. Your book is The Third Jihad. We've stirred up controversy because you stirred up controversy because I interviewed you on your show in Atlanta, and it aired in the UK.
Right.
And the British what do you call it? British
Communication Office, Government Communication Office.
Sent you some very threatening legal letters, which you forwarded to me because my name and my comments in the interview were mentioned.
Yes.
And I thought, I feel like Martin Niemöller in the Third Reich when Goebbels or Goering reads a transcript
Right.
of his previous evening's
Yes.
phone conversation.
Yes.
It's like, well, here's what you said, and it's very intimidating.
Yeah.
Never
Word for
happened to
word,
me before.
word for word.
Well, yeah. And so they're telling you, we've got our eyes on you. You better watch your step.
Exactly, and I think that's the point. And they want to make sure that you basically the TBN would not back down. I'm so grateful for them and the leadership in London, a really amazing group of leaders there. They would not back down. They would not say we're not going to have him on the program again. And they said, no, we stand together as one. And we have a lawyer that's working with both of us. But I provided the bulk of the information because, again, the Third Jihad book, when you look at it and you read the thing and you get to it, I said, where did he get this? You go back and you see the footnote. It's translated from their work. Everything comes out of document. I learned this when I did my PhD back at Emory in the early 80s. They always taught you to document everything.
Yeah.
And I learned that lesson, so I try to document everything. I'm not going to make any accusations, false or otherwise. I just don't make accusations.
Well, look, you're talking about very serious stuff. It better be true. Otherwise, of course, you're going to get in trouble. But here's the good news and the bad news. It is true.
Yeah.
You've done your research. I know, because I've read the book, that this is a very serious accusation that radical Islam is trying to infiltrate the West. And there are people, naive people, in the British government, in the United States government, usually it's the deep state types, who don't really have any clue of this any more than, let's say, many ministers in Europe had a clue of the threat of the Nazis. The Third Reich has as its cognate the Third Jihad. This is a stated intention to take over the world. This is not a movie.
No.
This is real.
Absolutely.
And you're simply telling the world about it.
Telling the world about it because most of the world will not be able to read it. Not only even if they read Arabic, there's so many people. But I read, actually, I'm constantly reading the press in the Middle East every day, literally every day.
You read Arabic.
I do.
I want to be clear.
Yes.
You are from that world. You grew up in Egypt. You read Arabic.
Right.
So you are not some stranger. You are in the middle of this world.
Right, and as you know, Eric, I have had the joy of meeting with some government leaders in the Middle East, particularly in Egypt and elsewhere, who are very much concerned that these people who are now barred from their home countries are now going to England and they're going to the United States and they are forming organizations, getting non-profit status, and in order to infiltrate our political parties because they are awake to them over there. And they said, well, we need to get out of here. Not that they've given up. They're still causing trouble in the Middle East.
Right.
And President Sisi of Egypt has been trying so hard to eliminate terrorism, but they're still working in the Sinai Desert.
Well, I really think we have to push back. We have to fight back. And I hope TBN UK will think about airing this conversation because I want people in the UK to know that you can love people.
Absolutely.
And you can still differ with them ideologically.
Yeah.
We're talking about freedom, Michael. We're not talking about Americanism.
Right.
We're not talking about forcing Christianity. We're talking about freedom.
Absolutely.
And this is something which is not, most of us who have these freedoms aren't even aware of what they are. So in having this conversation with you, I want people to be aware.
Well, here's the fact. I've posted the pictures, the videos on my social media. An evangelist happened to be an African in London, in Hyde Park, preaching the gospel. Police comes in, take a Bible away, arrest him. And he kept saying, please don't take away my Bible. And by the same token is a Muslim preacher just around the corner. And the police went to him and said, please stop, sir, you're disturbing me. He said, you're going to come after me? He backed off. He said, come on after me. And the policeman just walked away because intimidation had worked and is working and is frightening people in government. It's frightening business people in England and in some parts of the United States. And it's frightening the average individual. I have people in my church said, you're going to bring us terrorism into this place. I said, well, look, if the Lord takes us home, it'll be a great privilege, and I'm happy to be the one to bear that brunt. But we cannot live in fear, because that means they've succeeded. If we start my generation and yours may not see it, but certainly our grandchildren will absolutely experience it. Will be worse than what they see in Iran today if we do not speak out now.
Well, that's why I encourage my audience, get a copy of The Third Jihad, Overcoming Radical Islam's Plan for the West by Michael Youssef, Youssef. What can we do, Michael? I mean, I know reading this book, I can have you on this program, we can discuss this. What else can people do?
I think people need to be aware of the fact that even some of the conservative media would not air some of the things that we're talking about. I mean,
you saw what happened with Judge Jeanine Pirro made an anodyne comment question.
Yes.
There was nothing wrong with her question.
Right.
Fox took her off for several weeks. Right. I have to tell you, that was chilling. That was amazing to me, that Fox News, because of Murdoch and his connections with Arab money and Sheikh Waleed, because of that, even Fox News is bowing to this pressure.
I wrote an op-ed for FoxNews.com on anti-Semitism. Just think about this. A guy with my background documenting, and I thought it was well thought out op-ed. They would not publish it because they said, in the light of all that's happening with Judge Jeanine, we can't publish this now.
You're kidding.
I am not kidding you. I mean, the conservative outlets in America now being intimidated.
All right. So people now have to go to Salem Media and TBN.
Yep.
I mean, we're talking about this freely because we believe in truth and openness and freedom. That's why I'm proud to be an American.
Sure.
And
the First Amendment is still
but can you imagine that we even have to say this, that when we're talking about Fox News or whatever? I'm so proud of you as my friend that you've written this book, again, The Third Jihad. I don't know where we go from here, Michael. What has the reception been? Because the book has been out now for more than a month. Yeah. What's the reception been?
Well, it sold about 30,000 copies and is doing okay. Amazon just ordered another 1,500 copies, and I'm glad for this kind of modest success. I wish every American would read it because it is not a Christian book. I mean, a Jewish person, a Catholic person, any person could read that book.
Well, including any Muslim. I hope Muslims will read it.
I have Muslim friends who have read it and have commented on saying, thank you for bringing this up, because we are frustrated because people tie us with the Islamists. Yeah. And they are really even more enthusiastic about this than others.
Michael Youssef, I'm sorry we're out of time. Congratulations on the Third Jihad. Thanks for being my guest.
Thank you, Eric.
And folks, don't forget, I was on Tucker Carlson last night. Great video. Please share it with your friends. And tonight, I will be on with Tom Shalhoub, FoxNation.com. And in a couple of minutes, Milo, he's back.